In your life, you're not going to build only one company. Money is a super important part of it, and I don't think I can bootstrap it. Hence, I need to raise VC funding. So there's not a logical flow to arrive to why VC funding is needed. I would like to feel that the main epicenter of the startup ecosystem are entrepreneurs and not people who fund them. At the end of the day, it's better to see money as a means to an end, a very important means at that, but still a means to an end. Entrepreneurship is not about building a company. It is about acquiring a set of skill sets that can have a certain amount of impact on a certain problem. That is entrepreneurship.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Startup Operator Podcast. I'm Roshan Karyappa. Is funding a prerequisite to building a business? Well, with all of the money that's come into the ecosystem, one might be tempted to think like that. But today, we'll talk to an entrepreneur who has followed a different approach. Karthik has built Flexible and built to over $3 million in revenue. Flexible helps you hire the best engineering talent in the market, and Build is a platform for entrepreneurs to learn and share. Karthik talks about the idea to product to company journey, the do's and the don'ts along the way, a lot of tactical advice on growth, on scaling, on hiring, and so on and so forth in this wonderful conversation. And I hope you like it.
Yeah.
Hey Karthik, welcome to the Startup Operator Podcast. Thank you so much for making the time.
No, thanks so much for having me, man. Roshan, it's really, really thankful.
So I've been reading your tweets for a while, and I think your takes are pretty awesome. They combine the right amount of insight and perspective, right? So think of the podcast as an extension of your timeline,
Okay.
right? I want to start with this notion of bootstrapping versus VC funding, right? By the looks of it, you seem like the poster child, the ideal candidate to sort of raise VC funding, right? I mean, I am Ahmedabad. And then JP Morgan, you've been in investment banking and so on, right? But then you pursued a very different path, and you've bootstrapped Flexible right now to about 3 million plus in revenue, right? Why did you take that path? And also, I mean, if you could sort of compare and contrast both these routes.
Sure. No, so great question. And I think a bit of the context around why I chose bootstrapping has got to do with how the series of events went about. So, I was working in JP Morgan post engineering, and like, of course, engineer never did anything in engineering immediately after, at least. And after 3 years, I realized investment banking wasn't for me. And I thought maybe an MBA would give me the chance to decide what my next move would be. And I got through IIM Ahmedabad, but the scene over there was that the very first day I went in, it was all about placements. And like, even before getting there, to be honest, it was guys, ensure that you get your CV points approved by your managers, and get your resume ready and be prepared for the internship and so on. So that sort of prompted my journey to say that possibly I'm not here for the rat race. I really wanted a place where I could introspect and decide what my next move was. But it seemed like the next move was already decided, and most people already knew what the best job out of campus was. Right, it was consulting and IB, and I felt that was what I left behind as well. So for me, it was the best decision, or the best time rather, to make that decision to say, okay, let me give entrepreneurship a try. Right, and I quit the internship process, and that's where I said, okay, what do I work on? And fast forwarding 2 years a bit to just get to why we chose bootstrapping. But broadly, we started what ultimately became Flexible, and we made a lot of mistakes along the way, and possibly, hopefully, we'll cover some of those things when we talk. But in that, when we finally got to Bangalore after college, we realized that we had no money in the bank anymore, because we had already made two failed products which were like absolutely unnecessary. And we decided our focus can be just to make money. And Flexible, in a nutshell, just connects software engineers. At that point in time, it was only contract or freelance software engineers with tech companies. And we realized that for this, you don't really need a product, right?
Mm.
Like you can just manually find an engineer, you can then map them to a company and make money off commission. uh, and we just tried it for a couple of months, and we actually started making money. Not enough money to live like a king, but enough to survive, right?
Mm.
Like, I would say we were in abject poverty, to be absolutely honest. But yeah, it was enough to get by. And we could see that, okay, there's possibly a replicable path. And at the same point in time, VC started reaching out to us, just to have a conversation, as they do. And we felt that most of the conversations that we were having didn't really resonate with who we were as people, in terms of, because I think the focus of the business was how large is the market. um, can Would you do this matching through AI? Would there be machine learning? Like, what are you doing? How is that happening, and so on? When I felt there can be some more uh, focus on actually saying how you're going to generate demand, how you're going to generate supply,
Mm.
how you're going to map the two, what is like the core difference, and how, why do you think you can scale, right? Like, instead of saying how big can this be on an absolute level, and then saying how much of AI is going to be used for it, right? So there was one, a disconnect in terms of the kind of conversations we were having, and it also felt that if we were to go down that path, our focus on the business would get diluted significantly, at least one of the founders. And the second point being that fact that we had started making money, and we felt that we could make a bit more each month to get to a place that where we possibly wouldn't need to be dependent on anyone else. And typically, in terms of the journey that I said as well, largely it was to do something that gave all the three of us happiness.
Mm.
Right? So entrepreneurship, to be very honest, like, people have very different motivations. Possibly most of them say that I want to create impact, or this problem is really close to me and I want to solve it. For us, it wasn't that. We wanted to do something where we are truly happy doing that every single day of our life with people we are really happy working with, really enjoy working with. And in that context, it felt that if we hold our destiny in our own hands, we'll be able to shape it the way we want to. And bootstrapping seemed something that would be the most amenable to that goal,
Mm.
in terms of who we were, as in terms of our
So
personality, and also where we
you
wanted to
have
get.
the most amount of control of your destiny, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. And that sort of is a good stepping point to talk about bootstrapping versus VC funding. So there's a lot spoken about in terms of what kind of business you're building, and what your goals are with the specific business. But I think there's some more to talk about in terms of who you are as a person,
Yeah.
and what your goals are in general in terms of how you want to lead a life, right? And I think that's less spoken about because uh, most the people possibly don't reflect. Once entrepreneurship is very consuming, right? Like, once
Mm.
you're into it, there's not too much you can reflect about life in general.
Yeah.
But assuming that if you're stepping into this life as an entrepreneur, it's a 10, 15, 20-year commitment. So you need to get into a lifestyle that is sustainable for that particular period of time. And in that context, I think bootstrapping is one which is really hard for liftoff, right? In the sense that the first couple of years, or how many years, is going to be really tough, right? And you're possibly not going to make much money. And as a consequence, given the only money that you make is the money that you live on, you're not going to live a great life, right? At least in terms of luxury or convenience, right? So if that is super important to you, I think VC funding is possibly the option for you, unless you have a rich family and that can fund you in a certain way. The second point I feel is, long term, is your goal to achieve, as they nowadays say, unicorn status and all of that. And I'm not saying that bootstrapping can't get you there, but I think when you're bootstrapping, you're not optimizing for that,
Mm.
right? And if that's not important to you, then again, I don't think VC funding route is really necessary. And as I say that, the very easy thing thereafter for bootstrapping is, if you do get lift off, right? You can then actually decide the terms of how you build your company, how you lead your life outside the company. And broadly, it doesn't have to be one company. You can decide how you want to grow it in terms of, okay, I want to do this as well. Maybe you want to build a second company, you want to build a third company, you want to do some gig on the side. All of those things are under your control, right? But the moment you go down the VC funding route, one is that you're going to be raising money forever, right? That's just the only way that it works. It's very far and few that companies raise once and never raise again. There are, of course, cases of that, but it's very far and few. Typically, the model is going to be for growth. So, as a consequence of growth, you're not focusing on being sustainable. So, you obviously need money after a few months. And once you burn through that cycle as well, you need another one and then another one, right? So, typically, VC versus bootstrapping, it's a decision that you make in terms of what you want to optimize for, and then you make peace with the consequences. So, broadly, if I have to summarize, bootstrapping, tough lift off, VC, easier lift off, gives you a decent life even in the earlier years. Bootstrapping later on, you can decide your destiny, you hold it, you can decide how you want to grow the company if you do reach there. Of course, most startups don't go through and like don't survive the initial stages. We see possibly not holding your destiny in your own hands for the longest period of time.
Yeah, that's a very concise sort of a summary, right? I think one of the biggest learnings that I had from my entrepreneurship experience was to zoom out and figure what type of business you want to do, right? Because I mean, I was so naive. I mean, it was a typical founder problem. Let's build a solution and then figure who can pay for this kind of a
Sure.
routine, right? I mean, extremely naive about it. And as you so beautifully kind of explained, right, that the outcomes are you have to start with the outcomes in mind in terms of what is the lifestyle, where do you see yourself like 5 years, 10 years from now, because you know bootstrapping is more of a lifestyle, I would say, right? And if you value things like agency, if you value the amount of freedom that you have to do what you want, then I think that is the
Right.
thing.
Right.
Because one of the other things that I think people normally don't value, or they're not able to like sort of wrap their head around, is all of the other stuff that may not translate to money but is equally important to
Right.
you, right? Like your time, for instance.
Correct. Correct.
Right? Or the direction in which you're headed, or the fact that hey, you don't really have someone telling you what to do, right? So
In
those are
fact,
things that I don't think people factor in, but are equally valuable, I would say.
100%. And I wouldn't see if you are an early like or an aspiring entrepreneur, right? A lot of what you understand about this particular space is going to be based on what you read, what you watch, right? And there's a huge amount of echo chamber in terms
Big
of
time.
what or how a company needs to be built. And my primary problem is with that narrative. If you ask any particular entrepreneur, what's the first step they'll take when they want to build a company? It's going to be raise money, right? No one's talking about this is my idea, this is how I'm going to build a business. And given that I need to build a business this way, money is a super important part of it. And I don't think I can bootstrap it. Hence, I need to raise VC funding. So there's not a logical flow to arrive to why VC funding is needed. VC funding is taken as a given. And that's where I think I have a problem with the narrative.
I mean, I've literally seen that change, as I told you, right? I mean, so I've been in startups for 15 years now, and around 2008, 2009, I mean, you could count, on your fingers in terms of how many startups got funded,
Yeah.
right? And 1 million was a major thing, 1 million,
Sure.
3 million, 4 million. If you remember, I think Flipkart's first round itself was around 5 million, right? And then 2012, 2013, somehow the narrative changed to what you mentioned, which is that if I have to start a business, then I have to raise money, right? And I don't think that is the right approach. I mean, there are businesses that obviously, I mean, will require money. I mean, and depending on the type of entrepreneur also, I mean, if you are building something, let's say truly unique. I mean, some hard tech that will take like, that'll have a huge gestation period, and you have to pump in a bunch of R&D money, and you have to hire the best people and stay
Right.
afloat for a couple of years. Okay, fine, right? Or maybe if you're building a consumer internet business with 40 other people, but you're solving it in a different way. I mean, yes, sure, you have to
Sure.
compete with all of those people for mindshare. So obviously you will have to raise some money, right? But otherwise, I don't think
So
that should be a default.
arriving at it logically,
Yeah,
and saying that that's the only way to build it.
Because I think what happens, I think, is what you're alluding to, is that people sort of take that first step and then figure that, oh my God, okay, now it's kind of a hamster wheel, right?
Right.
And then you look at like the conversion between C to Series A and Series A to Series B and onwards, right? And especially now, post the boom, when you're not getting those check sizes in. And then you have a case where, by Series B, Series C, I mean, the founder is down to like maybe single digits of ownership, right? And there are massive down rounds. So what is even the point, right? I mean, it's very unfortunate actually, because
100%.
I've theorized that you will have a bunch of orphaned companies in another year or so. It's already happening, right? Where the founder has very little skin in the game, right? There's literally no incentive. And it's pretty much it's just like wafting around, really.
It is. And like, I think that's what happens when you haven't thought through a business, and a business is being run for VCs than being funded by a VC.
Correct.
Right. So when you start your business by saying that I need to raise money, then the metric that you're optimizing for is for a venture capital. Right, for a venture capital firm, and not for a business customer. Right. So the moment you're optimizing for raising money and not for raising money from customers, which is making revenue, then like the way you build it will not work. That is one. And second, it's not just about people who get on the hamster wheel. It's about people who think, oh shit, I can't build a company now because I have not been able to raise money. And being totally helpless and thinking that VCs are your God-sent angels who are the ones who can make or break your idea is not a great idea in itself. I feel that that's not a notion that I would want in a startup ecosystem like ours. I would like to feel that the main epicenter of the startup ecosystem are entrepreneurs and not people who fund them, right? At the end of the day, it's better to see money as a means to an end, a very important means at that, but still a means to an end. But you still need to walk the path, and it needs to be focused on the entrepreneur rather than the one funding them.
For sure. And, this is not to dunk on VCs or anything, right?
No, 100%.
Obviously, I think, they perform an important role in the ecosystem, I would say. And much of the attention that startups have got has to do with all of the VC activity that's happening as well, right? But I feel like, bootstrapping has to be made sexier. And hopefully now, we have examples as well, Zerodha, Zoho, Flexible,
100%.
so on and so forth, right? So, all right. So in summary, I think bootstrapping or funding comes down to your outcomes, what you're shooting for, and the type of business you want to build. So as long as it's a mindful decision, I think either can work out very well. I mean, obviously, there are a bunch of examples on either side that you guys can check out. One of the things that, really appealed to me about your Twitter, some of the tweets that you put out was this aspect of doing things that don't scale, right? You're sort of a, anti-automation guy in some sense, right? Like if I can talk about the fact that, you said that the first matching that happened on Flexible, right, was not through tech, but it was literally you onboarding some people and then figuring out like where there could be a match, right? Again, this is something that is not intuitive, right? Because people feel that they need to build a tech or they need to automate something, from day zero and scale it, right? Because scale is an operative word. How did the thinking come about? And also, I mean, could you talk about, how that's changed over time?
Sure. So broadly, I wouldn't say that I'm anti-automation. And the context is largely that you can't automate something you don't understand, right? And I think most people in the early part of their journey, what they're trying to do is say that I'm at zero. Of course, my goal is to reach to 1 million, right? So I can't do all of that manually. Let me build tech and automation so that I can serve millions, right? But the honest to God truth is you don't have a single person using your product today, right? So, and it's not to say that I didn't make that mistake. And as I was alluding to earlier, we made 2 products, and that was our learning from it. That we were trying to solve a problem that we truly didn't understand, right? And the goal is largely to do that with not just manually, but with tech that is easily available out there. So, for example, if we were to build Swiggy today, right? If you ask any entrepreneur, how are you going to build Swiggy? They'll say, I need a mobile app, and I will take that app to restaurants. I'll get them onboarded, and
I
then
need 3 mobile apps, right? I mean, one
yeah,
for my fleet, one for the consumer, and one for maybe the restaurants or whatever.
exactly. So, and you'll be like, okay, to build that, I need a set of engineers, and I need to pay them, and to also market to so many people. I of course can't go and tell them individually. I need to start, pumping money in performance marketing. And the moment you start doing the math around all of this, you realize that the only way to build it is to fund yourself by raising money. And the problem is the fact that when you're doing all of that, you possibly are not building a product that actually solves for the stakeholders involved in the right way, solves for what the market needs. So the easier way would be largely to say, okay, here is my phone number, right? Anyone who wants to book a meal from any restaurant, just WhatsApp me. I will send you the menu of the restaurant. And how about you pick it? I will go manually pick it from the restaurant and drop it to you. In the process, what happens is that I realize exactly what customers ask when they look at a menu, and I'm able to therefore design the menu in a way that solves all of the customers' problems. I am actually now taking that order and manually going to a restaurant, and I am now placing the order for the customer. So now I know the exact way in which the restaurants accept an order. I also now have faced the exact set of challenges that my delivery personnel will face. I pick the order, I realize all the problems that I might face in a restaurant, and then when I go and deliver it, I face all the problems that I could face in delivery again. So you've looked at the entire ecosystem end to end, and then you start building for it. And even here, it isn't the goal that it's not a 0 to 1 journey, which is to say that you either have tech or you have no tech. You have a lot of tech or you don't have any tech at all. It's about infusing tech bit by bit, right? And largely, what is tech, right? It's an enabler for doing good business, right? But
it's not the product in itself.
Yeah, it's business before tech, right? It's not tech before business, right? So if you look at it in that way, you need to basically find what is the bottleneck in your business, which tech can unblock, and therefore you don't have all bottlenecks at the same priority. You're going to start facing bottlenecks one after the other. And tech also should be built one after the other to solve for the first bottleneck, solve it, let another bottleneck pop up, solve it, then another bottleneck. So in this way, you actually start building a true business that exists. And thereafter, you're infusing tech to solve a problem you truly understand. You're not building tech before you even know anything about the business at all. So that's my opinion largely about doing things that do not scale. It's not to not scale, but it is to do it at a time when you actually understand what your business is, so that you can scale something that works. Because scaling something that doesn't work doesn't help anyone anyway.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I mean, I think you have to do that n equal to 1, n equal to 10 maybe journey before you really scale it to multiple, right? And, a couple of examples to add. Dunzo was a WhatsApp service, basically.
Right.
You could WhatsApp them what you need and they'll deliver it to you. And the founders did their delivery themselves. I mean, I remember talking to these folks in the early days, right? We had Ravi Teja of iMums recently. They have 6.5 lakh app downloads, and they started as a WhatsApp community as well, right?
Nice.
So yeah, plenty of examples where people have solved the need first and then figured the form factor, right? Because tech is a form factor. I understand, right?
Yeah.
People, myself included, I mean, you get like sort of overawed by all of the
Yeah.
shiny stuff.
Yeah, fancy,
but I think
yeah.
you have to sort of understand that the core service is more important than anything else, right?
Yeah.
Now, you've done this idea to product to company journey more than a couple of times, and some have worked, some haven't worked. What are your learnings from this whole idea to product to company journey?
Firstly, I think before even starting on an idea, I think one needs to understand whether they're ready to walk the journey that is needed. Are you ready to commit to that particular journey for close to 10 years? Because I think that is something that most people don't think about. Again, like you were talking about echo chambers, I think there's a certain amount of I would say a shiny attraction to entrepreneurship, where you feel that, wow, like even I need to build a startup, startup, because I think not everyone needs to build a company. Right. So I think first people need to really introspect if building a company is truly what they want, or are they doing it because of all the media attraction or whatever societal value they
It's
think.
just way harder than people think it is.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? And it's going to take way longer than you think it is. Even if you're successful, that is, right? I mean, I've seen, people where obviously it is a success, but they've taken 10, 12 years,
Yeah.
right? And they're still getting started and there's still problems to solve, right?
Yeah.
So
So it's such a long journey, and I think that's where I would say that you need to first think about whether that's the journey you want to walk, because it can get really miserable otherwise. And I wouldn't say that even if you wanted to, you would not have days that you wouldn't want to quit, like, because I've had many of those in the early times, because it can get really alone and like really really sucky. But that's the point when knowing why you're doing what you're doing will really help you get through. I think so. That's the first thing. Next is choosing the idea. I think an idea is a notion, right? And I wouldn't take it too seriously, in the sense that I would first choose an industry that I feel I'm really passionate about. And I feel that if I work in this industry, I would just enjoy, I'll just have a brilliant time, right? And I say that because I feel every industry has one problem or another that needs to be solved, right? And it's better to choose an industry, spend time in it, interact with the stakeholders in it, search for the problem by just listening to them, rather than making an assumption, which is called an idea, and then validating whether that idea has merit or not. Right. So, especially for aspiring entrepreneurs, I would just say choose an industry and go to a community where your stakeholders exist.
Interesting. So you're saying first absorb everything there is to a particular space, domain,
100%,
industry,
100%.
right? Because problems are aplenty everywhere.
Everywhere,
right?
100%.
Whether it's healthcare or consumer or wherever else. So first live that industry, and then let the problem kind of appear to you.
Yeah, exactly. And the advantage of doing that is that you find a real problem, but you don't just find a real problem, you are now a part of a community that you can ultimately sell to. Right.
So if let's say a wannabe entrepreneur is listening to this podcast and is passionate about, let's say, pharma, for instance, right? So what should he or she do?
See, pharma is not something I'm super...
Any other industry, whatever that is.
Yeah, so typically, like, I would try to understand, let's take pharma as well. Like, my point being that I will try to understand, if I'm solving for pharma, how can I get access to people who are in that particular industry? Right? So do they hang out in certain communities? So let's say there are subreddits where a lot of pharma related stuff is spoken about. And I think about digital stuff because it's easily accessible. There's not any red tape that you need to get through to actually be able to access that part of it. Right? So if you can do that, right? If you can't, get internships in some places, just observe, right? And that's where I feel that services business aren't appreciated enough. So go as a consultant. Maybe you have one skill that you're really good at, and that can cater to that industry in one very minute way. Just go and give your skill, charge by whatever, and learn. Like you'll get paid to learn what you want to ultimately build. My whole notion is based on the fact that an idea is very malleable, right? So you need to, when you start off by saying this is my idea, you're by definition etching it in stone.
You can't be married to it.
Yeah, you will get, if you start from it and say, okay, I'm going to validate whether my idea is good or not. And people talk a lot about validating ideas, right? I would rather choose a problem by truly understanding the space it is in and derive my idea as a consequence of it, right? So that's one approach of going about it. Now the second approach I would say is, and this is what I think is really good for first time entrepreneurs, and what I mean by that is that first time entrepreneurs are taking a huge risk, right? They don't understand what entrepreneurship truly is. So at that point in time, you don't want to be taking big bets, right? Go into a space that already has a lot of competition and ape your competition, right? Your competition already shows you that there is demand, right? Go build the same thing. Go to their review platform, see what customers are complaining about, right? Go and see what the companies share to say that this was their journey, this was a set of mistakes they made, right? And reverse engineer a company from there.
This is again very unconventional, right? Because normally people think that they should start with a brand new insight and a brand new idea.
Right.
But I think the best place to start is where a problem that a lot of people are already trying to solve,
100%.
right? Figure if you could do it, maybe even if not 10x better, at least 5x or 3x better.
Right. Like the idea is, if you can find something that is totally new and you crack it out of shape, definitely you've defined an industry, you're going to build a really huge company. Now the point is, what are the odds of it, right? And the odds of it is really low. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't shoot for the stars, like you definitely should. But should that be your first shot? That is the question.
Correct. Yeah.
I would
so
rather
you can iterate and sort of get to that.
Yeah, because in your life,
10x
you're not
or
going to build
100x.
only one company. I believe any good entrepreneur might build multiple companies in their lifetime.
Right.
And entrepreneurship is not about building a company. It is about acquiring a set of skill sets that can have a certain amount of impact on a certain problem. That is entrepreneurship. And the consequence of doing that is building a company. Right?
Amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you think of it in that way, your first iteration, which becomes your first company, is basically just something which was in possibly a crowded space. But as a consequence, you learn what it means to build a company. You'll still learn how to build a product. You'll still learn how to do marketing, how to do sales, how to do customer service. You've picked all of these skills. You've possibly also got a bit of success, hopefully, by iterating. And then you can use all of that experience and then shoot for the stars. Essentially, as an entrepreneur, while people think that it's a risk-taking journey, what you're trying to do is to play the game of odds, right? And each decision that you make needs to improve your odds by a significant margin, right? And in the same vein, if you're an entrepreneur in the first year, since you asked me what you would do from an idea to a product and so on, your goal in the first year is to do enough to not quit. Right? It is not to make $1 million or $1 billion or become a unicorn.
Just survive.
Yeah, day 366. If you are running and you're like, boss, this is exactly what I started, this journey for, and I have the energy to go another 10 years, you have succeeded in the journey pretty much. Because in the first year, you have 80-90% of people saying, this was totally not what I wanted to do. Right? And if you start optimizing for that, and you're not going to be so kicked if you're not doing some things right. Right? But when you start thinking about day 366, instead of saying $1 million, $10 million, $1 billion, I think things become a lot more realistic, and you can actually optimize for what is in front of you rather than what you're dreaming. Right? So the goal, I often say this to my friends, dreams are what give birth to entrepreneurs, but they can be the ones that kill them as well. Right? You can't live in your dreams and imagine that just by doing that, you can build a company. Reality is what actually creates a company, and dreams is what powers it through. Right? You can't not be a dreamer, because if that was the case, you would not start up at all. But if you keep dreaming, you would not be a successful entrepreneur either. So you need a very fine balance. But on a daily basis, I would say you need to live in reality by seeing in what is in front of you, rather than thinking about the distant, amazing future that you want to build, you want to create, which is might be a unicorn
Right.
or whatever else. So
It's a journey, right? And it's not a and you will have these milestones, and perhaps you have to optimize for these milestones as you move along. But yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful framing that you've suggested, right? And especially if you're the kind of person who's maybe, let's say, 25 to 30 years or 35 years old, and you haven't spent like 20, 25 years in, let's say, pharma, right, or telecom or wherever else, and the problems in a particular industry are not very apparent to you,
yeah,
right? What are the odds that you will build a 10x better solution on day one, right? Next to nothing.
yeah,
So what you suggest is go there, absorb everything, maybe build a marginally better solution, right?
yeah,
Maybe more than marginally better, right? Gain some experience in terms of, let's say, how the sales cycle works, what are the typical challenges, simply understanding, what does your stakeholder do in a day, right? Where do they hang out, what do they do,
yeah.
what do they care about, what keeps them up at night, so on and so forth. Basically what you're trying to do is gain enough insight
Right.
to make the next iteration that much better.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And when you think of the next iteration, also in an order of magnitude, right? Like on day one, your goal is to get the first customer. On thereafter, once you get that, your next goal is to get 10 customers, then 100, then 1,000. If you think of it in an order of magnitude, then it's possibly a realistic goal for you. If you're not optimizing for $1 billion or a unicorn valuation from day one, you can actually work backwards and say, these are the steps that I need to take. And you then start solving for bottlenecks of today. Right? Unfortunately, because people think about the unicorn valuations, they're usually not solving for problems of today. And that's why they don't exist tomorrow. Right? So you need to be able to survive till tomorrow for you to be able to build the beautiful future you're envisioning, right? And people think that there is possibly shame in it, right? And there is no shame in surviving, right? Because if you don't survive, there is nothing you can do thereafter. So you need to first survive, and then you can plan on how you will thrive, right? And that journey is how you will actually slowly become a bit better entrepreneur to ultimately being a successful one. So we broadly spoke about what the mindset is to decide whether you even should be an entrepreneur or not. We've spoken about how to choose an idea, and broadly 2 ways that we can go about it. How you can optimize the first year of the journey, right? And in terms of thinking about not failing and being there and optimizing for that. My broad submission to people is that if you are smart and if you're passionate and about what you're solving, while you might start with something that's just marginally better, being on it day after day after day will just make it 10x better no matter what.
Yeah, you're tending towards that.
You're tending towards that. And given that idea is just a notion, right? You'll keep tweaking the idea to get to a place where you're solving a problem that is large enough that isn't being currently solved well enough so that you can get to where you want to be. So thinking about it in steps rather than trying to jump a flight of stairs in one go makes the journey a lot more easier and also digestible, and as a consequence increases the odds of success. So broad framework of thinking of how to go about it.
Okay. Let's say you've chosen an industry, you have kind of sort of validated an idea. How do you find the first 10 customers? What has worked well for you with Flexible and Build and the others?
Right. So broadly, I think there are various phases of a company. And I have found that the very early phase where you have no customers to where you want to get some customers, the only way to do it in the highest uh, impact possible is to go do sales, right? And when I say sales, it is basically you going doing one-on-one sales, and I pretty much talk about B2B because that's my area of expertise, to be honest. uh, but just go and sell to people one-on-one, convince them about why they should be buying what you're making, and if they don't buy it, come back with a list of reasons why they haven't bought it, iterate on it, and then have reasons why the second one should buy it, and now you already have 4 reasons why they should buy based on the feedback you got from the first.
Yeah.
Right? So sales is basically just holding your own destiny in your hands and saying that I will make a sale no matter what. Right? It's lovely to market, and especially for someone like me, again, I feel I would rather prefer not to interact with people too much and be able to sell sitting in my.
So Karthik is making a rare exception for us today.
No, I guess
No, I get it. I was talking to this founder who is a bit of an introvert, more than an introvert, I would say, right? And he is again in the situation where he has to sell, obviously, right? And so much of trepidation and fear and everything, right? In terms of, okay, what do I do? Because I think when I talk about a salesperson, people immediately imagine some kind of a Don Draper-ish sort of a figure, right? I mean, very debonair, very suave, says the right thing at the right time, and just wows people in a room and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I think it's a lot of like rejection after rejection
No,
after
no,
rejection.
it's the toughest job.
Learning, and figuring it out.
Yeah.
And engineers especially, right? I mean, have this thing that probably sales is a whole other attribute and everything, but I think you can engineer sales.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think at the end of the day, it's a problem solution, right? What you're trying to do is you're trying to learn with every interaction. It's not a binary outcome. Figure out like why, as Karthik said, why they want something or why they don't want something, and what they will pay for, and just sort of iterate forward, right?
Yeah.
As simple as that in some sense.
Yeah, 100%. And see, like largely entrepreneurship is doing things that you swore you'll never do in your life. Right? Like, and ultimately realizing that that's the only way to success.
Right.
Right? So if you have thought that you'll never do sales, sorry, you'll have to do it. And I feel founders have to be the best salesperson in their team early on.
Yeah.
There is no other way. If you're not able to sell something that you're building, surely your employees are not going to come and be as passionate about it and go do it better than
Absolutely.
you. Right? So, and I feel there is a certain amount of sales in every interaction that we do.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're trying to sell your opinion. Like now what I'm trying to do to you at this point in time is say, this is my opinion, please trust me.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm trying to make my case. And that's pretty much what you're doing when you're selling your product as well. You're saying that I've made a set of assumptions and I feel that it's very true. I've got it from other people in this industry. And I believe that I'm solving that better than anyone else that's going to come to you and say that they've solved it. So why don't you buy what I'm making? And I feel there's a lot of agency in that. And that's where I feel that early on, sales has got to be the way that people find a first pool of customers who can give you a set of testimonials, who can say that, yes, these guys were amazing. And yes, you should use it. And early on in the B2B space, again, what you're looking for is a set of logos and a set of testimonials attached to it saying that, yeah, I use this.
Yeah.
And yeah,
these guys are legit.
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, these guys are legit. It's like social proof, right? Saying yes, thumbs up. And the beauty is that once you do that, referrals can also start kicking in. So your first pool of companies can give you the second pool of companies as well. And all you have to do is focus on ensuring that you give them an amazing experience, right? So that's one more aspect that I talk about, which is that when you are early in your journey, your product can't be as superior as it's ultimately going to be, or it can't be as superior as a product that already exists in the market, most possibly. The way that you fill up the gap is by doing amazing customer service.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think customer service is sort of looked down upon when it's a great channel to build amazing relationships with customers and a great channel to get feedback from customers early on. And given that founders should be doing almost everything early on, if you're doing sales, And if you're doing customer service as well, you're holding really key relationships with companies, and you're also getting really key feedback that you would have otherwise not gotten, right? And I have found that companies are a lot more forgiving than you would assume
For
them
sure.
to be.
I think people will forgive you as long as they think that you're improving
Yeah,
and that you want to improve, right? That
100%.
you're listening to them
Yeah.
and that you're doing better today than you were yesterday, and
The
you're
goal
going to
is
do
just to
better.
be less shitty than yesterday, like,
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
broadly. Yeah.
No, people are very empathetic in that sense, because I mean, people also, I mean, it's such a chore to sort of cancel out of a subscription or change relationships or use another product or a service, that
100%.
people will kind of live with some bit of mild frustration as long as they are
They see a
hopeful
path,
that
right?
that you will fix it.
Yeah, exactly. And see, there's a certain amount of stickiness to it, right? Especially in B2B, like going and searching for another vendor, another product
Oh,
is a journey, right?
man.
And you have possibly trained people internally on a product.
And then the fear of the unknown as well, right?
Yeah, so
I
you
mean,
have to
who
again go
knows?
through the same journey
Yeah.
elsewhere.
Yeah.
So if a human can come and be the difference between what their product could have been or should have been
Yeah.
and what it is today, that's amazing. And that's what customer service is pretty much about.
Absolutely.
So early on, it's sales plus customer service will get you your first 10 customers. Keep iterating till you get to those 10 customers, and those 10 customers will keep giving you customers very much in the future. Your goal from them is to get their logo and their testimonial so that you show to the world that, see, these guys are vouching for me, they are using my product is legit, as you said.
Yeah.
Right.
So people should definitely check out this article on Zapier. I mean, that we'll perhaps link on the podcast. I've recommended this earlier also. And they grew to some 200-300 million in revenue, right? With hardly any funding, maybe like one round of funding or something of that sort. And the founder says, right, that look, there are two things that you could do. You could either be really fast and really be better, or you could just be a heck of a customer service person, right? And it's just way cheaper for you to be a heck of a customer service person than to be the fastest and the best and whatever else.
But it's not considered innovation, no? Like, so it doesn't sound sexy enough.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But like, if you are optimizing for odds again,
Yeah,
that's what you should be doing.
yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where, like, of course, you can't do this forever.
yeah,
Right. And I feel to scale, that's where marketing comes in.
yeah.
Like, because sales is one-on-one. Right. And if you need to go one to many, you need to be able to do marketing, and you need to be
Marketing
able to
is
do
a
marketing
force
well.
multiplier.
Absolutely. Like, you've possibly figured out what works well for your set of customers. You know what problems they quote. So you know what messaging you should have on your website, what messaging you should have on your social posts. And therefore, you know how to engineer their journey for an amazing experience. Right? So capture them, get them onto your website. Once they're on your website, you know how to engineer their journey so that they're absolutely happy and they make the purchase.
Wait, so let's back up, right? So we have our first 10 customers. Wait, before that, we've picked an idea, validated the idea. We have our first 10 customers. Now I want to grow from this 10 customers to, let's say, 100 customers, right? And you have a fantastic growth playbook, right? I mean, which is SEO plus, digital plus social, so on and so forth, right? So, and I'm sure that you would have applied each of these levers at different phases in the journey.
Sure.
So how did you go from, let's say, 10 to 100 customers and beyond that?
Sure. So the idea was to first, like, and I can possibly tell you my journey, and like, it's been like just powdered with a lot of mistakes one after the other. So we early on decided to go the performance marketing way and try Google ads, but the CPCs, like the cost per clicks which you have to pay, were really prohibitive in our industry. So it was just not a viable channel for us. So by that time, we had put in a good amount of effort in sales. So we had a small pool of customers. So the worry wasn't whether we'll survive the next 6 months. It was about how do we grow beyond that, right? So that's when we felt that we could wait patiently for the amount of time SEO takes to kick in, right? So if you do not have the time where you could invest, let's say 6 to 8 months for SEO to actually do its thing, SEO is not for you.
Yeah, SEO
Right?
is a long-term game.
Yeah. So if your entire thing is about survival for tomorrow, the only way you can go about it is sales, because
Yeah.
that's all you can do to go today and say, please buy my product. Right. So given we had the time, we started investing in SEO. We also started investing in some communities like Product Hunt, Indie Hacker. We were on subreddits, in some of the subreddits, and started investing in social as well.
So let's double click on SEO, right? What did you do specifically on that? I know that you have this whole template that you
Yeah.
shared on Twitter as well.
Mhm.
Could you briefly cover that template?
Sure. So, see, SEO largely is search engine optimization, right? Any person, any one of us, whenever we have any query, we go on Google, we ask Google a query, and Google gives us a set of results. Now, the results are basically links to websites, right? And it is what Google deems as the most relevant results for the query that we have asked, that the user has asked. Getting your website in those top 10 results for the relevant queries that your user makes is what the entire game of SEO is, right? If you are in pharma, right, like just extending that same example, and and you want a pharma exec, or let's say you want a doctor broadly who's searching for a tool that can help manage the set of patients that they get broadly, like in this industry. So you estimate what are the kind of keywords or the words that they would type in the search box, and your goal is to be one of the 10 websites that pop up there. Now the set of things that you need to do to convince Google that you are the website that it should feature, not just in the top 10 but maybe in the top 3, and not just top 3, the top website itself, is what search engine optimization is about. Now very broadly, there are two parts to it, right? One part is called on page optimization, which is basically what you can do on your website, and the second part is off page optimization, which is something which you don't control as much, which is how other websites view your website, right? Very broadly
Your
speaking.
peers, basically.
Yeah,
Think
it's
of it.
the reputation of your website.
Yeah.
I'll get to it in a bit. So the first part, which is on page, is what you have under your control, because that's your website. You control the content on it. So there are various aspects that you can optimize on your web page to showcase Google that for the query that the user has typed, your web page is super relevant. And some of the very obvious ways of doing that is saying, let's say the word is best uh, best product for patient management. Very very shitty way of saying it, but let's assume that's the phrase. That's called a keyword. Ensuring that keyword appears in, let's say, your page title. Let's say it appears in your biggest heading, then in the subheadings, then across the content of your page. All of these signal to Google that you are relevant to the query that has been typed by the user. Of course, there's a lot more nuance to it, but broadly speaking. So if you I broadly give a analogy of how you would, if you were to go to a librarian and you were to ask the librarian a book on photosynthesis, right? Photosynthesis becomes the keyword. Librarian is Google, and you are the user typing photosynthesis on Google search. Now the librarian has to decide which set of books to share. The way the librarian might go about it is to see whether photosynthesis is there in the name of the book. How many times does it appear in the chapter titles? How many times does it appear in the general content of the book? Right? And from all of the sea of books, she'll possibly shortlist 100. Now, from the 100, how does she sort and tell you what the top 10 are? That's broadly where the second part, which is off page optimization, starts coming into play, which is basically how reputed she thinks your book is. Right? Now, book being your website in our context of SEO. Now, the way that she would assess the reputation of your book is to see how many times other books have cited your book as a reference.
Correct.
To say that, yes, this is a legit book, this is a really credible book. Similarly, Google will try to see how many times other websites have linked back to your website. Because any website that's linking to your website essentially expects that if a user clicks on the link, a user on their website clicks on your link, lands on your website. So they're making a statement that I trust this other website, right? So that's a vote of confidence, a vote of recommendation that Google takes to say that this website vouches for this other website. And you want a lot of such other websites to link back to you. And these are called backlinks. So broadly, your goal is on page which you control to optimize your page for the keyword in various places of the page, and in the latter to get as many websites as possible to link back to you so that Google assumes you're a really reputed website. Together, when the two start performing in symphony, is where Google will think that you're relevant for this keyword, and you should also be shown in the top 10 results and the top 5 and so on. Right. So doing this over a period of time, of course, Google takes time to truly believe that you're relevant and also reputed. So that's why it takes a good amount of time. And that's pretty much the game of SEO.
Yeah, very nicely explained. Yeah, I mean, people kind of get confused about this whole domain authority and then meta tags and this and that. But very simply explained, that is what it is, on page and then off page.
Yeah.
And you can really set up a nice acquisition funnel on your website, right? I mean, and if you've been doing sales one-on-one, this is like, it's like manna from heaven, basically.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Because now you're getting people who have by themselves qualified saying that they're super interested in what you're building.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's actual intent. Right.
Yeah.
So SEO in that way, because people are searching with intent and you're targeting people who are showing intent for what you're building, the conversions will be a lot better.
Yeah.
Right. Than from any other channel.
So something that you also do very well is your social channels, right?
Mm-hmm.
Twitter, for example, have some 40,000 followers and so on, right? Like, how do you tie that to your business? I noticed that, on Twitter, you have this bootstrapper persona, right? I mean, you're trying to appeal to other, wannabe entrepreneurs and so on, and you're sharing very valuable content on that front, right? Was that like a conscious decision? If so, I mean, if someone else is listening to this, I mean, how should they pick that persona and build that content that could be aligned to their business?
Yeah, so it wasn't super conscious. Actually, it started from the fact that we realized that we definitely need to be active on social media. My friends from college know me as a person who was totally averse to social media, and I swore that I would never, make an account on any of the social channels. And till date, I don't have an account on Facebook, right? So it just so happened that a few years into building Flexible, we realized that we're building a company and we're building it bootstrapped. And if we don't talk about our company, no one else will, right? So we definitely needed to. And at that point in time, the obvious thing to do, and like what we saw, I wouldn't say obvious, but it seemed like the natural thing to do was to just open a company account and start tweeting randomly about your industry. And the thing is that social media by definition is about people being social. And people aren't social with non-living things like company.
Yeah.
Right? So people want to interact with people. And that's where we recognize that just yapping around about our company through a company account is not going to really cut it. No one's going to relate with what we are saying. No one's going to be inspired by it, or no one's even going to find any interest in it. But at the same time, while we realize that we possibly need to start our own personal accounts, given the context around the fact that we never wanted to start an account, we started asking ourselves, what's the most sustainable way of doing this? Right? And we recognize that just sharing what we are doing on a day-to-day basis, whether the mistakes that we made, share them in terms of lessons, some milestones, some successes, basically just sharing our journey in entirety can be a sustainable way to do this in the long term. Right? Because one thing that we figured out, apart from the fact that you need to build a personal brand and not a company brand to be successful, is the fact that social media is entirely about consistency. Right? And we believe that we can't be consistent being something we are not. and being closest to what we were can be the way forward. If it works, great. If it doesn't, we'll have to find some other way to go about it. Thankfully, it did work in a certain way. At the same time, of course, like my first set of tweets were absolute shit, right? And that's where, like, I feel that in any particular skill, my goal is not to be amazing. My goal is to be less shitty than yesterday. And when you frame it like that, if people say be a little better,
Yeah.
but when you say less shitty, you're already saying that you're shit,
Yeah.
right? So it's easier to come to terms with the fact that your quality might not be amazing, but you're still just improving day by day. So that you just become a little less worse than what you were yesterday, right? So that was the goal. And I think from really poor tweets, we started being able to understand how social media works, because we are so far away from it, slowly getting accustomed to what really works on it.
And when you say social media, broadly Twitter and LinkedIn is what you're using right now.
Correct. And the reason for that was, again, while we decided we'll be doing some work on social media, we also didn't want to expand way beyond text based platforms, because we felt that that would again not be something that we could sustainably do, which is get in front of people, start posting photos of ourselves or make videos of ourselves. That wasn't something that we were super comfortable with, and something we wouldn't have been able to sustainably do. So we stuck to Twitter and LinkedIn, and just started sharing all our lessons. And it helped that our target audience on the company sides were early stage companies. And we believed that if we were sharing our experiences around how we build companies, what we learned, other founders would also resonate with what we are sharing, would find value in what we are sharing. And over a period of time, we would build a community on Twitter and LinkedIn that really trusted the fact that we are genuine founders more than anything. And the idea broadly is that we build a brand where people first find who Karthik is, and then they ask, what is he doing? And as a consequence, find Flexible and build.
Right.
If I just start pushing Flexible and build by itself, being non-living things, they wouldn't attract as much attention.
Yeah.
But being a person that I could possibly be relatable, and as a consequence, people find my companies, was the path that we were trying to go for.
I think social media rewards authenticity, right? And it's very easy to tell. People are, smart. There's a wisdom in crowds, right? And people are able to tell when you're being really authentic or not, right? So, yeah, founder-led brands do extremely well, I would say. And there are plenty of examples of this, right?
Right.
Have you done some thinking on the brand per se, right? Because I think that would be the next big lever for you.
Well said.
In terms of like, how do you extend this further? You have a nice acquisition funnel, you have sales, you have some growth. How do you take it beyond that and compete with the really big folks in your industry?
Exactly. So we spoke about the first part, which is sales. Then we spoke about scaling acquisition, which is marketing, which becomes one to many. And the next part, which is about cementing your position in the industry, is brand, right? Because marketing is basically about, broadly, like telling people who don't know who you are, what you're doing, and trying to convince them why they should, trust you and why they should use you. Brand really sort of makes that entire journey simple, more effective, and really scales many to many, right? Because now you are not the one talking to many people. Many people are talking to many people,
Correct.
right? You start saying, oh, do you know about Flexible? That they're doing this stuff. And you never even, they're not part of your team at all, right?
Or
And
do you
this-
know about Karthik? Basically?
yeah, even do you know about Karthik, right? Like it helps, like all of these small things, and that's pretty much what you want to be doing. And for us, I want to get to now is not know about Karthik, but know about Flexible now, right? And social channels were a way to build our personal brand, to do marketing, which was to get leads, to convert people, to build a business, which is to gain revenue. Now building a brand would be not about me, but would be now about the company. And we need to do a set of things so that Flexible becomes a really, really important part of tech hiring in general. So if people think about tech hiring, one of the names that should be top of mind is Flexible, right? If you are thinking about hiring an engineer and you talk to your friends pretty much, they say, why haven't you tried Flexible? Now, there is no way for me to do that through my Twitter handle. There's no way for me to do that through SEO. And no one trusts any of these channels as much as people around them, right? You'll trust the recommendation of your friend, of your colleague, 100 times more than what you see through Google or what you see on Twitter or LinkedIn. And that's the game broadly to totally cement your position in your industry. It's easier, of course, said than done, like as is any of these things. But yeah, that's the
What
next
are
step.
some of the things you're doing tactically? Like, how are you approaching this?
Right. So one was, even our website. We felt like early on it was all about doing things that don't scale. So we built our marketing website on a no-code tool, right? So it costed us $10 a month, right? And we used to get about 500 or 600,000 hits every month. So $10 for that is like absolute like nothing, right? It's pennies, like. Uh, but then we realized that if someone comes on our website, because it's so much like what they see anywhere on the internet, they're never going to remember it. We need to make the experience memorable in terms of how they experience, how they view our brand. And that would be basically something different, right? And we started mapping exactly the set of things that we would want them to take back from the experience on the website, and said how we can communicate that visually and also through the copy on the website. So that would be one element of extending your brand. The second, which was something that uh, I feel some people try to do too early, which is PR, right? PR is not good from a perspective of generating leads, right? It's not a good marketing agent at all, right? And I know I might be saying something that's not very popular, but it's also because it's not something that you can easily track. You
Yeah.
can't say if a lead came, was it because of this PR I did? And early on, you want to be able to do things that you track so that you can double down on it and do
Correct.
much more of it. But over a period of time now, once you are not worrying about your survival for the next year or couple of years, at that time, PR might add to that next level of credibility to reach people in channels that you are not able to reach, right? And to start sharing your opinions in forums where they consider thought leaders are sharing their opinions. To start talking about things at an industry level, not just talking about things from your company perspective, right? You start talking about how you're shaping the industry. You start talking about how the industry is moving ahead, so that you start seeming like the thought leader that is going to be a really super important part of the industry. As a consequence, slowly other journalists also start picking up on the fact that you're a super important part of this industry, and they possibly reach out to you for opinions when they are trying to write an article on something, or when even if they don't want your opinion, they quote you as one of the very important players in this particular industry. So for example, while we've gotten into the full-time engineer hiring vertical very recently, we've been in the freelance hiring vertical for quite a while. So most of Flexible's mentions in various media articles comes in gig related stuff, freelance related stuff. So we didn't have to work too hard for it, but that just came to us because of all the work that we did in terms of general brand building. But now if I want to accelerate that in the full-time hiring vertical, I'm going to have to do a bit of a push from my side in terms of PR, right? I'm going to have to go and share my thoughts in terms of how I feel that this industry needs to move ahead, how we are the thought leaders, how we are going to shape it, how we are going to make the industry much more streamlined, how we are going to take it into the future.
Right.
So broadly, one is how they interact with you on your areas of access, which is one say website or on your socials, and how you can push and create an experience which is different from everyone else. And the second part is channels you can't access, but are channels that they truly trust and know to be credible. And you being there and sharing yourself as, projecting yourself as a thought leader.
Right. Yeah, I think you just have to have a position, right? I mean, you have to have a stand one way or another in order for you to be respected, in order for you to stand out, right? I mean, and that becomes very key with PR, right? And it does not have to be anything extremely scandalous or like
Not at all.
very polarizing or anything, but just have a stand. Don't say the same platitudes that people give all the time, right? And again, be authentic to who you are as a company and as a person as well, right? So I
100%.
think that is something that I've seen work.
Yeah. So when you think of brand, right, and we spoke about personal brand and a company brand, in essence, what is it? It's something that uniquely identifies who you are, right? And whether it's about you as a person or you as a company, it's about doing that and then saying that repeatedly, so that people are able to say, oh yeah, he's that guy, or oh, it's that company, right? So it's easier than what it looks, but of course tougher to execute. But in essence, identifying what's that unique position that you want to acquire in a person's mind, and as you said, being genuine about it, because if you have to do it repeatedly, you need to be able to sustain it over a period of time. So yeah, you would want to do something that you're totally authentic and genuine about.
Awesome. We're going to take a slight tangent, okay, and talk about this whole services company versus product company thing. A lot of people think services business is very unsexy, right? Literally, you're renting your time for others with a certain value add, and so on, right? And rather, I mean, why not build a product that is loved by everyone and scales to infinity, right? But you have a slightly different take on that. So, could you elaborate?
No, sure. I spoke a bit earlier about how you can go into an industry that's super crowded and try to just solve a problem that's already validated, right? Uh, Similarly, when I say similarly, the idea behind that was to play the game of odds, right? And to improve your odds and work on something that you know exists. Similarly, in the case of services, it's largely about the fact that building a services company has an higher odds of success versus a product company. And the reasons are very clearly that you need very less investment to start a services company. You can start making money much sooner. You still learn all the skill sets that you would need to build a product company, at least a lot of them. And you can use the money that you earn, the skills that you learn, to ultimately build what might be your dream product company. So I wouldn't say that services company is the one that you should build. I feel that, again, like I suggested, that as a first time entrepreneur, it's a lot more pragmatic to build a company in a space that is crowded. Similarly, I would say it's a lot more pragmatic to build a services company first, to understand what it means to build a company, and thereafter use all the stuff that you've learned from it or earned from it to build your dream company.
Yeah.
So it's about, again, playing the game of odds. Life is a series of bets, right? And you want to keep winning each bet that you make,
Right.
right? So that you can make a more risky bet tomorrow, knowing that your odds of succeeding at a risky bet is also not that bad.
Yeah. I think there's probably like, I don't know, 100, 200 startups in that whole BTM layout, direction towards Silkboard that followed this template, in the pre-funding days. I myself followed this template, way back when, 2012, 2013, right? Where a bunch of these folks, we just built a services company. We started doing services, recognized that some of these things could be productized,
100%.
and then you had immediately you had 4 or 5 people, and you had 5 customers for your product, which then you tried to scale, right? I mean,
Exactly.
obviously, I mean, mixed success for all of them, but for sure it reduces the it reduces the risks associated with this whole 0 or 1 kind of a game, right?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know why people again like diss on services. I feel like it's
It's just unsexy, right?
Yeah.
Like in terms of like if you talk about innovation, right? Like and that's what seems to be the sexy thing to say, right? I'm innovating, I'm disrupting, I'm revolutionizing. Like you want to be able to say some of those words when you talk about the company you're building.
right.
If you are saying that what I'm building is a marketing agency, or what I'm building is a content agency or an ads agency, it just doesn't sound as sexy,
Yeah.
right? And the fact is that there is nothing wrong in it.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, like you're building a business to make some money,
Yeah.
so that you can build a bigger business, right?
Arguably, there are more services companies than product companies anyway, right?
Yeah, and
Way more. So
is this fair? Because
Yeah.
there is some truth to the fact that you can't scale services companies as quickly as you can scale a product company. But that's where, as you said, if you do have a product mindset, you can productize your service as much as possible. And one added advantage which I missed adding was the fact that you are giving yourself exposure to an entire industry. So that, as I suggested, that as you keep
yeah,
interacting with an industry,
people are paying you to learn.
paying you to learn, and you can find an area where you can build a product,
Yeah.
right? So people largely talk about, can you make the shift from a services mindset to a product mindset? And my point is, you should have a product mindset from day one. But because you have a product mindset doesn't mean that you build a product from day one, right?
True.
You build a services company and start productizing it, start infusing tech in it, start automating it, and ultimately you build a productized service, and you can still use all the money to build your dream product company.
Right. So we've largely focused the discussion around growth, right? How do you go from 0 to 1 to N? I want to talk about some of the other stuff that is perhaps equally important. The kind of people that you hire, all of the other things like product, sustaining yourself on that front, right? And perhaps, I mean, we can do many podcasts, multiple podcasts to go into all the nuances on that. But I just want to ask you about your team. I think you guys are about 20 to 30 people right now in terms of headcount and so on. How do you think about team, right? Because it must be a temptation for you that, hey, I'm doing all right. Why don't we add another 10 or another 15 people to this? I mean, it could certainly ease our burden, so to speak, right? So how do you stay lean when you're growing?
Yeah. I think my opinion on this has evolved a lot. And I would also say that it's one of my weakest skill sets, which is team building in general. In that aspect, I think bootstrapping enforces a certain amount of discipline in that we can't hire more than we need, or rather we feel that we shouldn't hire more than we need, right? But as you also mentioned a bit before in our discussion, you said bootstrapping is a way of life, right? It is good to a certain degree, but when you start making company investment decisions similar to how you spend your personal money, it gets a little tricky, right? And bootstrappers are really, they make this mistake quite a bit.
Yeah.
They're guilty of that quite a bit. Yeah. So early on, it's right, and it's literally your money, so that's what you're doing. But the thing with business decisions is that maybe out of 10, 8 fail, but the 2 give disproportionate amount of success, that they actually pay for the 8 and 10 times that, right? And therefore, I feel after the early stages, where I truly believe that founders should be doing almost everything, right? Early stages, work-life balance is a notion that is like very widely spoken, and I'll take an unpopular opinion here. I feel that if you want to build a company and work-life balance is super, super important to you, please don't build it, right?
It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. I'm sorry, like I am having to say this, but the reality is that in the first 2 years, you're not going to have work-life balance. And maybe a few more years after that. But yes, you wouldn't want to keep walking that path. You would want a certain amount of balance thereafter. So early on, founders do everything. Understand what you're doing before you delegate, right? Once you slowly start delegating, and I would imagine that at that point in time, you start hiring generalists. You don't hire specialists, but you hire generalists who can start taking things off your plate and can start doing them by themselves. It is a part that you have largely standardized in a way and will incrementally improve thereafter. And generalists can start picking it off your plate. And that's pretty much what we did. Almost every part of our company, it was once led by a founder, cracked by them, and then handed over to one of our colleagues
Take that further,
to
basically.
take that further.
Yeah.
Now, of course, you can't keep following that template, and that's what was a rude reality that I sort of faced, was the fact that being a generalist myself, right? Like I have a few skills, but being a generalist myself, I realized that, or rather, I wanted everyone to be able to pick up new skills on the go. Like, of course, yeah, they can pick this new skill. They let them learn that, let them standardize it, let them give it to someone junior to them. But it so happens that after a certain degree, you can't scale that idea because you can't find so many generalists who are so good that who can learn or upskill on the go at that rate.
Yeah.
Also, founders typically try to find clones of themselves, I feel, early on, and till they recognize it's a mistake at least. And what I mean by that is they want someone who's able to crack things similar to them and also put in the same amount of time that they do at work, right? If employees really wanted to do that, they would be founders themselves, right? So while early on, I still believe that anyone joining an early stage company should understand that it would not be a easy ride. Long term founders need to understand that if they want to scale their company, they can't find people who are willing to sacrifice their life for work. So work life balance becomes a must long term to scale your company. And I think that's the realization that I have come to in the last 8 to 10 months, that if your company cannot find replicable amount of success with employees that work from 10 to 7 p.m., 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., broadly, like good hours, normal hours, then your company has not found a product business model kind of fit. Right?
It's not scalable.
It's just not scalable.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the position that we are now. And you just have to invest and work on the premise that if you do invest in the right set of people, again, it doesn't mean that just because you're hiring specialists, you don't need right people. You still need people who align with your culture, who can bring their best during the time that you're working. And the premise has to be that together as a company, you work and take it ahead. Having said all of this and saying that bootstrappers are guilty of, thinking of business investment as personal investment, you still can't go crazy in hiring. We are very, very specific about the number of people that can show a proof of concept of that particular function succeeding. And then we would start saying, oh, this is the right template. These are the right set of things that you need to do to make this a success. And this is a right kind of person or a persona of a person. If we were to hire more of them, we'd be able to do more, like we'll get a lot more of success.
Right.
And being bootstrapped, we don't have a time bomb that will burst, or in a sense that if we don't achieve a certain amount of growth in a certain amount of time, that gives us a certain amount of patience to say that we don't need to expand our team too fast.
Right. Yeah, very well put. Again, One of the things that I realize is the same things that held you in very good state in the 0 to 1 can actually hurt you as you scale,
100%.
right?
No doubt at all.
I think there is this whole perfect employee fallacy that every founder has, where you want the person to do all of the 50 things,
Yeah.
right? Almost like a Superman or Superwoman type,
Yeah.
right? But as you scale, you have to optimize for a narrower band of value,
Yeah.
in terms of whether it is skill sets or in terms of just what people are capable of.
Yeah.
Right. So, I've seen a journey from say around 40-50 to 555 600 people, and I've just noticed that myself, right?
100%.
That what you have to do beyond a point is to build your systems in such a way that you're getting enough from that narrow band of value itself that things don't break.
100%. And that's when you've built a company that can truly scale.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right, man. This was fascinating. I think we covered like a lot of things, right? And hopefully, this is a great primer for people to go from idea to product to company. Because my goal with this podcast really was to be able to tell people that A, you don't need a ton of money to start up, and B, starting up does not have to be an all or nothing game, right?
Yeah.
You can take sort of calibrated risks and
Right.
build in a sensible way.
Right.
That entrepreneurship can be a lifestyle, right? And see basically to show a path forward, right, in terms of tactically what they should do, step 1, step 2, step
Right.
N.
Right.
And I think we've achieved that to a great extent. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being on the podcast and sharing your insights with us.
Thanks for having me, man. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Hopefully we'll have you again.
Cheers, man.
Cheers. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Startup Operator podcast. I hope you liked these insights. Like, share, subscribe, all of the good stuff. You know what. And I'll see you soon on another episode with another fantastic story. Thank you.